Are you ready? Big game this weekend, Michigan versus Michigan State. Welcome to Wolverine State Sports Podcast here on a Friday afternoon, the day before the big game at noon tomorrow on Fox. I'm very excited about it, very enthused by it. And before we get this thing started, this will be available on SoundCloud, this podcast. This will cover all the Michigan sports. First off, we'll obviously talk about Michigan State. Then we're going to get on about the Detroit Red Wings and the way that they've played, because they've been absolutely terrific. And they have a big game tonight against the Florida Panthers, who are dealing with a lot. We'll get into that situation as well. Then we got the Detroit Pistons. They lost last night, but I thought it was a much better game than the way they've been playing. A lot of optimism in the Motor City right now for both the Red Wings and the Pistons. So we'll get to those two teams later, but we have to start with this big game. And the first thing I want to talk about is the narrative surrounding these two teams. I've been hearing it a lot on local radio, and I've been hearing it a lot here on comment sections, that both these teams are not really that good, and that both teams are not really top 10 teams. And look, I do agree on one thing. These teams are nowhere near the levels of Ohio State, Alabama, or Georgia. To me it's Alabama, or to me it's Georgia and Ohio State. Georgia and Ohio State. Those are the two teams this year that I think are legit. And then you look at Alabama, I think they're still head and shoulders better than most teams. They stumbled against A&M. I don't think they're as good as Georgia and Ohio State this year, but that doesn't mean they couldn't beat them. But getting back off of that tangent, these two, Michigan and Michigan State, both are not on the level of those three teams, and I don't think they're close. But here's the thing. Who is? Cincinnati? I still need to see more from them. They struggled last week. I think they're good, don't get me wrong. But I'm not convinced that they're head and shoulders better than Michigan and Michigan State. And supposedly that's the next best team. Oklahoma? Oklahoma has looked very bad in a lot of games this year. They barely beat Tulane. They barely beat Kansas. That defense is absolutely atrocious. And then offensively, they're not invincible either. I mean, they're starting a true freshman at quarterback in Caleb Williams after Spencer Rattler struggles. I don't think this Oklahoma team is unbeatable by any stretch, and I do think that they're going to stumble against either Baylor or Oklahoma State or Iowa State. I feel like one of those three games is the perfect game for them to be upset, and I think they can't afford to lose a game with their schedule. They can't afford it, or they're going to get kicked out of the playoffs. And then you look at the other conferences. ACC, I think both these teams would win the ACC. I know Pittsburgh's playing well. I know Wake Forest is playing well, but both these teams have strong enough front fours. I think they'd give Pickett some problems in the pocket, and I think they would beat Wake Forest, both Michigan and Michigan State. You look at the SEC. That's probably where it'd be tough. I feel like both these teams are probably middle of the pack SEC teams, Michigan and Michigan State, if they play in the SEC hypothetically. And then Pac-12, I think that they're better than pretty much all the Pac-12. And even Oregon has struggled a lot lately. I don't think it's the same Oregon team that beat Ohio State. Maybe they're not quite as good as Oregon, but here's the thing. I think both these teams are at least top 15 teams, and I think the winner of this game is likely a top 10 team. The thing is, I don't understand the narrative of these teams not being good, because both these programs are great programs. You look at Michigan, they've kind of struggled this past decade, but they've picked it up. Jim Harbaugh is capable of winning 9, 10 games a year, and this team is different because they don't make the stupid mistakes. They don't come out looking sloppy. Something feels different about this Michigan team from Harbaugh's other teams, which were not bad, by the way. Definitely not playing up to their capability, but still at least top 20, top 25 good. Then you look at Michigan State. There's a lot of talent on this football team, too. You look at offensively, Kenneth Walker's been one of the best running backs in the country in the Heisman discussion. He's been terrific. You look at their receiving core, Naylor, Reed, Mosley. These guys scare me, and they should scare any defense that they face. And then Peyton Thorne has been terrific at the quarterback spot. So this offense has all the weapons, and the numbers back it up. So I don't think either of these teams are overrated by any stretch. Maybe they're not quite top 10 teams, maybe top 15. But these are two very, very good football teams, and they wouldn't be 7-0 if they weren't. Because I'll tell you what, a lot of teams are not, and it's not like they've played great competition either. So I think this is a weird year of college football where there's three teams really that could dominate, and one of those teams, Alabama, might not make the playoffs because I don't think they will beat Georgia. So if they lose two games, they might be done. So it's very possible the last two playoff spots could be wide open. I unfortunately think Ohio State's going to run through the Big Ten, and I think Georgia will win the SEC. But then after that, Cincinnati is not invincible. We just talked about all the other teams that are invincible. It's very possible the winner of this game could be considered. You never know. They'd have to hope Penn State wins out, and that the rest of the Big Ten steps up. But the fourth playoff spot to me is wide open, and these are the kind of games you have to win. And even if that fourth playoff spot is not wide open, both the winner of this game can make the Rose Bowl. So this is a very big game at stake. Let's not twist it. Sometimes it just feels like the narrative is that the SEC is so dominant that, if you're not a top five, if you're not in the playoff, you're a terrible team. That's just not true. We sort of have this. I hear it all the time with Michigan that they've only won half a national championship in the past 50 years, which technically is not 100% true because Michigan did win a few non-AP championships, and I'm not a fan of the coaches poll personally, but they won a few non-AP championships, but that's besides the point. The point being is that in Michigan State, you look at them, they've won half a national championship since 1966. So, that's not that much better. But the fact of the matter is, you got to look beyond just the national championships. These two programs are capable of winning 9, 10, 11 games a year. And they're only getting better. What Mel Tucker is building at Michigan State is special. The way he's able to get the transfer portal, the way he's able to recruit, his recruiting's been a lot better, and Jim Harbaugh has also been recruiting well. I think both these teams are on the up and coming, and it finally looks like Jim Harbaugh is able to develop a quarterback, which is huge, something that he hasn't been able to do. So I'm not questioning these two teams at all. I think they're both at least top 15 teams. And call me crazy, but look at the rest of college football. Who else do you think is better? You think San Diego State's better than these teams? I don't think Notre Dame's better than these teams. I watched Notre Dame play Virginia Tech and really struggle. Down by 9 in the fourth quarter against a 3-4 team in the ACC. Coastal. That was important to add. So, yes, these two teams are legit. Let's just get that out of the way. And let's get it past the rah-rah stuff, and let's talk about the game. The interesting thing about this game is both teams defensively are very similar. Both teams have very, very good defensive lines, very good front fours. You look at Michigan, I think Aiden Hutchinson might be the best defensive lineman in college football, and I'm not sure it's even close. Projected to be a top 10 NFL draft pick. He's been absolutely terrific. And then you look at Chris Hinton at the defensive tackle spot, excellent for Michigan. David Ojabo, the Scot, has had a great year. I'm not worried about Michigan's defensive line. And Michigan State's defensive line is excellent as well, with Panashuk and a bunch of other guys really stepping up. Panashuk absolutely terrorized this team last year. So the weakness of both these teams is their back seven, but not quite in the same way. You see, Michigan's main weakness is the linebacking core, their ability to cover stuff coming out of the backfield. And last week, Northwestern was running screens really effectively. I'm worried that Michigan might not be able to stop some screens. And then you look at Michigan State, it's really more of the secondary that struggled. They struggle with giving up big plays, giving up big pass plays, letting offenses pop the top off of their secondary, I guess, so to speak. So in a way, that's a little bit different way of struggling, but essentially it's the same. The back sevens of both these teams are the liabilities. So which offense is going to expose which defense? And that's where it gets tricky, because you ask yourself, which team has a better passing game? Because you think this is a game where passing is going to be imperative. And there's no question it's Michigan State at this point. You look at Peyton Thorne, he's absolutely terrific. And I think Michigan State's receivers are a lot better than Michigan's receivers, just based off of the way they've performed. But I will say this. Peyton Thorne has struggled when Michigan State can't get big plays in the running game. And I don't believe they're going to be getting them today. So Peyton Thorne is kind of going to have to do it on his own. And I think if Michigan State's smart, they're going to run some stuff out of the backfield like swing passes. They're going to run some misdirection. I think that's their best chance to beat Michigan, is not using the traditional run game, but using those swing passes, because Michigan hasn't shown the ability to stop the screen game, the swing passes, the intermediate routes coming out of the backfield, bubble screens, all kinds of that stuff. Michigan hasn't been able to stop those kind of plays. So Michigan State's smart. that's going to be their substitute for the run game. So Michigan State's got the better pass game. But I believe Michigan has the better offensive line. You look at the fact they've only given up 2 sacks this season. Cade McNamara has been terrific at getting rid of the ball quickly. And Michigan State's offensive line, from what I saw in film, they struggled against the better defensive lines, and they're going to have their hands full this week. So I think that's the main difference in this game. I think Michigan's offensive line is that much better than Michigan State's offensive line, just based off of performance. And then you look at the passing game. Yes, Michigan State's passing game is better. But I don't think the gap between the two passing games is as big as the number shows, and even as big as the talent gap shows. Meaning, I don't think Cade McNamara is that much worse, or even worse at all, than Peyton Thorne. Just because of the lower numbers does not make him worse. You look at Cade McNamara, he does not turn the football over. He's great at making decisions. Really, the only thing that he struggles with is the deep passing game, which could really stink in this game. But the fact is, Cade is capable of throwing the ball deep. It's just that he doesn't deliver accurate balls consistently. There's been flashes where he's done it. He's thrown some good deep balls to Cornelius Johnson throughout the year, but nonetheless, I do believe that Michigan can get the job done with the intermediate routes, with the 15 to 20-yard routes down the field, the out routes. That's what Cade McNamara is really good at, is reading the defense, diagnosing it, making his decision. He's not going to put up amazing numbers, but you know what? He's going to get the job done. And against Wisconsin, when we weren't able to run the football, Cade McNamara was able to step up. So I think Cade McNamara is good enough that Michigan's going to win this game. I think Cade McNamara and Michigan's offensive line are the difference makers. And Michigan State's passing game will keep this game close. But I believe ultimately Michigan will win the time of possession battle, and they will win this football game by a close score. I'm going to go Michigan 27, Michigan State 23. But this is a game that really could go either way. If Michigan State, I feel like if it's a high-scoring, up-and-down-the-street basketball game, Michigan State will win. But if it's a low-scoring, grinded-out kind of game, Michigan will win. The good thing is that I think based off the matchups in this game, if Michigan can just find a way to not let those swing passes beat them, I believe Michigan's defense could have a big day. But if they continue to struggle defending the screens, Michigan State will have a big day. So that's what makes this game great. We have absolutely no idea who's going to win this game. These are two very good football teams. Let's just celebrate the fact these two teams are great, both in the same state, and that College Game Day is going to be at Spartan Stadium tomorrow, which is very exciting. So I just say embrace it. And I do believe both these teams are legit, and I do believe it'll be a close game. And let's embrace it. You don't see this every year. In fact, the last time these two teams were undefeated was 2010. Last time they were both in the top 10, I think, was 99, which was unfortunately for Michigan, it was a terrible game, but it was one of the best games in this series. And that's kind of the game where Brady established himself as a Michigan quarterback because he almost led an amazing comeback. But nonetheless, I'm looking forward to this. All right. Thank you all for listening to the first segment. Next on, we'll talk about the Detroit Red Wings. Lucas Raymond having an excellent start to the season for the Winged Wheels. And also you look at Mo Sider doing well as a rookie. A lot going on as they take on the Florida Panthers tonight. We'll be right back in just a second.